Good morning, College of Education, stakeholders, and guests. Welcome to the 37th College of Education Foundation Day Celebration Research Colloquium. This is part of the 3-month-long celebration of our founding of the beloved college. Welcome to our Google Meet participants, ma'ams and sirs, students, and to our YouTube Live viewers. In this event, we will be witnessing our students showcasing of their research outputs, an avenue to receive scholarly feedback and comments. We are most fortunate to have this event graced with an IDS alumna as our plenary speaker, who will be introduced later. Just before we start, here are a couple reminders for our participants. First, in the Google Meet, please refrain from opening your cameras unless requested. Second, please keep your microphones muted to avoid unnecessary background noise to interfere with the proceeding. Third, attendance links are provided in the Google Meet chat and the YouTube Live comment section. Fourth, to get your certificate of attendance for today's event, please fill up the evaluation form shortly before we end our activity. Finally, we encourage everyone to ask questions and give comments or feedback only after each presentation. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. We are now ready to start. May I request everyone to stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, to be followed by the prayer.
Now for the Muslim prayer. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanirrahim. Malik Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azaban nar. Wakina azaban nar. Amin ya rabbal alamin.
Let us bow our heads and close our eyes, and for the Catholics, you may make the sign of the cross. Dearest Father in heaven, Lord of all kindness and Lord of all grace, our heart is etched with sin. Forgive us. Let your grace and tender mercies erase each mark, each trace of filth in our mind, in our heart. For surely your arms are not too short, nor too weak to save, your ears not too heavy, nor deaf to hear. As we begin today's program, we ask that your blessing would rest on us. Guide and inspire us today to think and speak according to what you have in mind, that we will greatly benefit from the collected efforts, wisdom, and experience. We ask that you give us that great vision and enthusiasm for our work, to perform our duties and responsibilities with zeal despite the fear and uncertainty in our times. Even so, as we work, help us to put our plans into practice with passion and compassion for many who are afraid and afflicted. And when we ourselves are tired, troubled, and weary, enable us to seek you, to run to you for help and safety. Through Jesus' great and mighty name. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, telas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil, sa
Good morning and welcome, College of Education, to our students, co-faculty members, guests, and alumni, friends joining us today. We are also joined today by the leaders of the College of Education, to our Dean, good morning ma'am, to the different department chairpersons, coordinators of the different offices of the College of Education, the IDS principal, and to our stakeholders. To welcome us formally in this event, help me welcome dear students, co-faculty members, and guests, our ever-dynamic Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Amelia T. Buwan.
Good morning, our dear CED colleagues, members of the CED Execom Committee, and our dear CED students. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our College of Education Research Colloquium. This event is part of the celebration of the 37th Foundation Day. CED is pleased to organize this event for our CED students who will disseminate their research's result during this event. We are honored we have Dr. Lorelei Imperial, an alumna of CED IDS, a postdoctoral fellow in the University of Florida, United States. We are also very grateful for the presence of our CED Research Coordinator, Dr. MSU-IIT. I would like to congratulate all of you students who will present your researchers today. I know that all of you really give your best in accepting the challenges in the rigorous process of conducting your research. Based on the program, we have interesting discussion today on research results on scientific investigation done by our senior high school students, our college students, and as well as our graduate students. Your presentation today is very valuable to CED. We celebrate your success in doing research in your chosen field and worthy to be presented on this 37th CED Foundation Day. Lastly, I would like to express my grateful appreciation to the committee members. I know each member has contributed to the success of this event. Enjoy the research conversation, and as one CED family, let us strive hard to improve our CED research culture.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ami Buwan, for that warm welcome. And indeed, it is a great time to witness our students' accomplishments as they share their research outputs. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, let us hear a message from the CED Research Coordinator, a prolific researcher himself, Dr. Emelu Mordeno.
Good morning, Dean Ami Buwan, our beloved Dean, College of Education, our speaker, Dr. Lorelei Imperial. We are very much happy that you are here and will give us some insights and thoughts and ideas, particularly in the midst of this pandemic. To my colleagues, fellow researchers, everybody, good morning. I am glad that we are still pursuing our research colloquium amidst these challenging times. With the theme Academic Resilience in these trying times through unity, understanding, cooperation, and transformative leadership. I hope we could have been meeting with each other face to face in better times. But of course, as of the moment, it is not yet possible. You know, the College of Education research, 4 or 5 years ago, we have gone so far, and yet we are still far. We have gone far because if you compare research and productivity in the College of Education based on Scopus and based on journal citation reports MSU-IIT College of Education somehow leads in productivity in producing ISI Scopus Index research in the setup of all other universities, or rather in the context of all other universities here in Mindanao, or even in Visayas and in Luzon. Somehow we are competing, and somehow we are on the edge of our achievements in research. And yet, we are far. Malaysian quota would say that there must be at least 2 ISI publications in every faculty. In Nagoya State University, it's 7 publications in every, 7 impact factor points, no? In every faculty every year. But let's go to the Malaysian quota. It's 2 ISI publications per year. And MSU-IIT, nasaan tayo? We are still on 0.3, no, in terms of our research publications per year. Meaning to say, around, if I'm not mistaken, around 7 faculty are doing research, 1 research per year. No? Meaning to say, 7 faculty members are collaborating each other to produce 1 publication in ISI or Scopus Index, journals. That's why we are yet far. But we are not discouraged, right? Despite this pandemic, we are determined to pursue, to become more productive, to find that one reason for us to continue, and to be on the cutting edge of our skills in research and our productivity in different publications. The pandemic somehow provided us with so much difficulties, and yet it also provided us with so much opportunities. We have to change our views with regard to conducting research. We are now venturing into the digital world. We are now venturing into somehow unknown world, in a way, of the new normal. An unknown world of the new context, an unknown world of the new life, right? The new humanity. That's why there is really an opportunity for us to perceive and to construe things in a different manner. According to my favorite saying, by Albert Georgi, research is seeing what everybody else has seen, and thinking what nobody else has thought. With the pandemic, it equalizes humanity. It equalizes somehow all the vulnerabilities. That's why, while we experience similarly with people all over the world, as a scientist and as a researcher, we have to think outside the box. We have to think of the things that probably only few have thought. And this is our challenge, and this is our call. So, ladies and gentlemen, let this event be a reminder that despite the difficulties, that despite the challenges, we are here. We will remain here. We will be more focused and be more productive. Because in times of difficulties, I hope that we will become better researcher and better individuals. With this, again, I am proud and I welcome everybody to participate actively in this research colloquium. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you so much, Sir Mordeno, for such words of challenge. Indeed, we are still far. And with the pandemic comes greater challenges, greater opportunities also abound. We must stay on course and pursue research by changing our own views of conducting research in these trying times. Thank you very much, sir. And as I mentioned earlier, my dear guests and ladies and gentlemen, we are very privileged to have with us a very esteemed speaker, an alumna of the Integrated Developmental School College of Education, who shall give us the keynote speech. To introduce our keynote speaker is Professor Ever Canalita, Chair of the CED Research Colloquium Committee, Faculty of the Integrated Developmental School. Let us give her a round of virtual applause.
To our energetic Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Amelia T. Buan, to our dear Principal, Professor Minda C. Saxon, to our presenters and participants, good morning. It is with great honor and privilege to introduce to you our keynote speaker in this research colloquium. Our keynote speaker is our very own alumna of Integrated Developmental School, Batch 2003. She obtained her BS and MS Chemistry degree straight program from Mindanao State University Iligan Institute of Technology in year 2003 to 2009. She also held Master of Science in Pharmaceutical Science, major in Medicinal Chemistry in University of Florida in year 2016. She obtained her PhD in Curriculum and Instruction with specialization in Science Education, still in the same university. She is a recipient of International Student Excellence Award given by University of Florida International Center in year 2019. She has published several researches in line with drug discovery, natural products, analytical methods, and even in quality instructions. Aside from being a researcher, she is also a good mentor. As a matter of fact, she is a current professor and a research chemist in University of Florida. Throughout her career life, she has attended numerous conferences from general chemistry to chemical education, which includes STEM and engineering projects. She has also actively involved in some professional services in science teaching and teacher education. Indeed, our speaker this morning is a well-rounded person, a passionate educator, a dedicated researcher, and an active enabler. Please help me welcome Dr. Lorelai Imperial.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So first and foremost, thank you so much, CED IDS, for this opportunity, for inviting me to be the speaker of this plenary session during your research colloquium. I'm going to put it out there. This is a very well-prepared event. I was actually very surprised. Everything is flowing smoothly. So you indeed made this research colloquium possible despite the challenge and the limitation provided by the current situation. Specifically, I'd like to acknowledge the leaders of both CED and IDS, Dr. Buan, the Dean of the College of Education, Professor Minda Saxon, the Principal of Integrated Developmental School, my beloved high school, and Dr. Mordeno, the Research Coordinator of the College of Education, and also the one who introduced me beautifully, Professor Everita Canalita. Ma'am Ever, Thank you so much for helping me prepare for my talk and for being the one who directly invited me into this event. And of course, the powerhouse of teaching and learning, the force of education in Iligan, the teachers who are here, aspiring teachers, in-service teachers. Thank you for being here. Welcome. And the students, the most important people, the reason why we're all here, high school, college, and graduate students of all backgrounds, welcome. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope I'd be able to share with you a portion of what I've been doing, and hopefully we will all take away something from my talk this morning. I was also informed that this event is streamed in YouTube, so whoever are watching in YouTube, hello. This is very, how do you call this, scary for me, but thank you again for this opportunity. All right, so I'm gonna share my presentation. Okay. All right, can somebody unmute him or herself and tell me if you're seeing my screen? Because I can't see anything. Yes? Hello? All right, I'm gonna assume, I'm hearing some feedback, but I'm gonna assume that you're all seeing my presentation. All right, so what I'm gonna share with you is a very important study that I conducted here at the University of Florida. This is actually my dissertation. I'm not going to share, of course, the entire presentation because it might take me a while, but I'm taking the important parts to share with you. And the topic, this is on building capacity for teachers through a STEM professional learning community during the global pandemic, COVID-19. So why this topic? So when I learned about today's theme, academic resilience in these trying times through unity, understanding, cooperation, and transformative leadership, actually I thought it was a huge topic. But when I reflected on it, first, it's very timely, of course, with the negative impacts of COVID, with the limitations that we are facing, with the constraints, and with just about anything and everything that COVID is bringing into our lives. We do need resilience in the academe. This is a trying time. However, this is also an important time to do a lot of changes, to reflect on our practices, to reflect on our beliefs, and to basically accommodate changes, good changes. So I learned about this theme, it's very timely. And then I thought about my experiences, both as a student and as a teacher in Iligan, as well as here in Florida. And then I thought, this not only applies to the current situation, actually this applies to everyday situation. Therefore, this theme is also timeless. Every day is a trying time for teachers and students, especially for teachers. So my talk is mostly about teachers. So why teachers? When you teach, every year is different. Every semester is different. In fact, every classroom is different. So every semester, we teach and we prepare for different set of students. They have different interests. They have different likes and dislikes. And with the aid of technology, the students nowadays is very different from, for example, my time. So they are ever changing. Every day is different from the previous one. And yet teachers, we are faced with the challenge to also move along with those changes. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we are so set in our ways. We teach this topic the same way over and over again. And yet we need to, if we reflect upon our practices, we do need to transform. We need transformation. We need changes. And that is why today I am especially talking to aspiring teachers, to practicing teachers, and researchers who are interested in education, and especially focusing on the teaching aspect of education, because teachers are the most important, one of the most important roles. They are the linchpins for STEM education, especially STEM education change. If we want change, we need to support our teachers. Why? Because they play the frontline role in education. And because of that, they must command deep content knowledge as well as pedagogical content knowledge. They must know their content, they must know the pedagogy. And second, they need to provide, especially for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they need to design, implement authentic learning experiences. What is authentic? Authentic means the practices, the activities are aligned with what researchers, with what scientists, with what experts do in the field. That's the meaning of authentic learning experience. And although these are only 2 bulleted points, these are actually big tasks for teachers. So as a researcher, you also, all of you here are actively involved in research, aspiring researchers, high school student. I admire you for doing research as early as now. College students, graduate students, research is actually, it's tedious, but it's fun. And the wealth of knowledge that you gain with research is very valuable. So my main goal for today is to talk about how research can inform teachers' support and preparation. So if teachers play an important role, what can I do as a researcher? That's basically my goal. And the answer to this is through professional development, through capacity building in the form of professional development. So actually my dissertation title is this: A Sense-Making Perspective on Graduate Teaching Assistants Knowing About and Planning for Model-Based Reasoning. So there are 3 important concepts in this topic. The first one is graduate teaching assistants. We may or we may not be familiar with this set of students. They are graduate students who are performing teaching roles. So I think in some departments in MSU-IIT, we have some teaching assistants, although they may not be performing major teaching roles. But for large and research-intensive universities here in the US, graduate teaching assistants is actually a big population, especially international GTA. So I'm focusing on them because, one, I was a graduate teaching assistant, and I am both. GTAs are both students, but they're also teaching. So imagine doing your PhD and teaching at the same time. I know a lot of you here can relate because you're working while you're doing all the requirements for your grad school, for example. So they do a lot and they have a lot of tasks, and yet this population is well studied in the literature, However, the problem is the teaching support provided is not really that much. And then the second concept, important concept that I'm going to talk about is model-based reasoning. So remember when I said teachers must provide authentic learning experience? So one of the many, when I say many, like it's a lot, teaching and learning frameworks, pedagogical strategies proposed to provide authentic experiences for STEM students especially is what we call model-based teaching and learning. And one subset of this is model-based reasoning, or MBR. So I'm also going to talk very briefly about MBR in the next few slides. And then the last important concept is what we call sense making. So now this is the research part of my talk. I'm using the theoretical perspective sense making to understand the GTAs, specifically how they develop in knowing about and planning for model-based reasoning. So I'm gonna explain sense making in a little bit, but basically this research is telling us about who is the context, GTAs, what are they learning, MBR, and then what did I use to theoretically ground my research, and that is sense making. All right, although I've talked about GTAs briefly, graduate teaching assistants. So the picture you see on the right, these are the graduate teaching assistants that I have been working with since 2019. Not really working with, but they are part of my research. I made friends with them. We created a community. So graduate teaching, as I've said, GTAs, they play a very important role, especially in undergraduate education. They are, in fact, aspiring STEM experts. They are chemists, they are engineers. So in my case, I was working with chemists and material science and engineering graduate teaching assistants. And some of them may or may not have teaching experience, but they are very good in their field. So as part of their assistantship, they are being paid by their teaching role. So they're provided teaching responsibilities, mostly in introductory courses like general chemistry, introductory biology, physics, and engineering courses. Now, what is the most important word there? Teaching. They are grad students, and yet they are teaching. When I talk to TAs, it's surprising, and even the literature is saying they actually don't identify as teachers. Why? Because of the word assistant. To them, they are helping out the professor, the instructor. Although if you visit laboratory courses, if you visit discussion, they call it discussion groups, or the lectures, the lecture portion, or quiz section, I think they call it quiz section. TAs or GTAs are the lead teachers in those classrooms, and yet they don't identify themselves as teachers, which is very sad, and that is supported by the literature. So I was very concerned upon learning from the literature and from TAs themselves that even though they are teaching, they don't consider themselves as teachers. So I thought that part of my research would be to find ways to support and prepare these GTAs. The reason is, according to the literature and even the lived experiences of these TAs, preparation for their teaching is not adequate. Usually they are in the forms of workshops, 1 day, 2 day workshop, and most of them it's about policies, what to wear, what to do, how to keep your classrooms safe, especially chemistry laboratories, so on and so forth. And then university orientations, mostly policies from university policies. It's a one-day big training with thousands of students, and then the TAs are there. Or some faculty actually do exert effort and they meet regularly with their TAs, weekly meetings or monthly meetings. Some of them are actually good forms of support for GTAs and for aspiring teachers. However, most of them, according to the literature, they just gather the TA, they grade together, or they talk about the results of the lab, so on and so forth. So basically, most preparation for GTAs is not adequate. So I thought that my research would be, again, to support and prepare GTAs, but that's a big task. Like, what do I want them to do? If I gather them and then tell them that, this is the best teaching practice, what would that be? So I went and used a common, and this has been in the literature for decades now. Some of them, they call it model-based teaching, model-based learning, model-based inquiry, but any form of teaching strategy that uses the concept of models and modeling. So in my study, I focused on model-based reasoning, or MBR. And again, because MBR is one of the many STEM teaching and learning framework that support student authentic learning. So I talked about it a lot. The goal was to provide opportunity for professional development for graduate teaching assistants, GTAs who are taking major roles in teaching. However, sometimes these roles are not sufficiently recognized by universities. And this professional development is in the form of STEM Teachers Learning Community. I called it STEM TLC. And then as the research component, so I gathered them in a learning community, and then my research now is to understand how they make sense of MBR, both as a student and then as a teacher, using the sense-making perspective. All right, so talking about sense-making. So I'd like to start by saying, since this is a research colloquium, and all of you, maybe most of you, I suppose, and I hope all of us here are very interested in research, if not very actively involved in research. The most important component, at least to me, and based on my experience, of a research is it should be theoretically grounded. It should either be supported by theories or is supporting a theory. So no matter how interesting your topic is, no matter how sophisticated your method is, if it's not theoretically sound, then it's hard for it to get it out there. By get it out there, I mean to publish maybe, or to support your claims because the lack of theory. So probably an important advice for researchers, active and young researchers, is to make sure your research study is theoretically grounded. So I'm going to talk a little bit, not too much, about my theoretical framework, sense-making in organization. So this is not so old. 1995 is not that old, right? I mean, I'm not that old, but anyway, so in 1995, the biggest proponent of sense-making in organization is Carl Weick. Sense-making itself, it's a huge perspective. Sense-making has been used in understanding how people learn, how people understand, how people know, how people make decisions. But Carl Weick narrowed down sense-making in the context of an organization. However, he described organization differently. So to him, when you ask people what is an organization or where is the organization, you cannot find one, because the organization is not about people. It's about the activity of people. It's a system of continuous activity pursuing a common specific goal. So I assumed that in this research, the activities that the GTAs do in a learning community makes it an organization. So that was my first assumption. So now the big thing, sense making in organization. So this is, to shorten the description, this is a process. And if it's a process, it has components. Think of a chemical reaction as a reactant or reactants, the products, and then the mechanism of action, whatever, however you call it. But basically the direction and everything needed to transform inputs to outputs. So as a process, according to Carl Wick and his and the other proponents, sense-making in organization is composed of these components: inputs or messages from the environment. So, for example, you are a teacher in a department, or you are a GTA in a department, and then you are told to join a professional development. Let's just say a PD organized by the College of Education. And then you're told MBR or inquiry or argument-driven inquiry, whatever framework is the best teaching practice. Would you adopt and use it immediately? Most, according to literature, in my experience, the answer is no. Before you actually change your practice or adopt novel strategies, you have to consider a lot of factors. According to Carl Wick, these are contextual factors. First, you have to know what the strategy is. In this case, it's MBR. Second, you have to think about your own beliefs, your own practice. I don't think that MBR fits, or, oh, you know what? I've been doing that, so I think that works. So that's your individual belief. And then other factors, other people around you. For example, your department. Is your department supportive? And do they provide the opportunity for you to develop in that aspect? So many, many contextual factors that before a teacher can do or change his or her practice, they have to consider. And then you process it in a learning community in the PD setting, and then your output is your actions, your teaching practices, your teaching beliefs, or the lack of it. Because if you resist, if you think it doesn't fit you, then you don't do it, which is actually what happens in most professional development outcomes. For various reasons, some PDs are deemed, and I quote unquote, ineffective, just because the sense-making process, one of the reasons is the sense-making process probably has not been, it hasn't come to full fruition. So more research aspect, which I'm just gonna go through very quickly. This research is a single case study. I have one case, and that's STEM TLC. And it's bound by whatever the activities we do in STEM TLC. I have 5 graduate teaching assistants from material science, engineering, and chem departments here at the University of Florida. And although I'm not really going to talk about each of these things in this table, but because we have researchers here as part of our audience, I aligned my research question with my data collection method, which is observation, interview, and analysis of artifacts. And I also aligned it with my data analysis methods to analyze my data, which is a constant comparative method and forming categories or categorization. All right, so I'm going to back off a little bit and tell you my experience when I started, from when I started conceptualizing about my dissertation. So way back in 2017, I was very involved. I was the graduate student in a project called Change Chem Lab. Change, it means cognitive apprenticeship for engineers in a chemistry lab. What we did was we transformed, we redesigned, actually it's a full revamp of the general chemistry courses here in the University of Florida at the Department of Chemistry. And we redesigned it into a design challenge. So instead of calling it Chem Lab 1, Chem Lab Activity 2, so on and so forth, or molar absorptivity, we called it a design challenge. One design challenge will be addressed for 3 weeks by a set of students. So these pictures are actually actual pictures of students engaging with our design challenges. So the design challenges is a marriage, I would say, of chemistry and engineering. We wanted engineering students to feel like they are engineers in a chemistry laboratory. But I'm not going to talk about curriculum development here, although this is heavily curriculum development project. However, we did a lot of research around this. In fact, you're seeing pictures of students doing the design challenge because every time they do a DC, we call it a DC, a design challenge, we take pictures and we record them using our cameras with their consent. So that's why we can analyze what they're doing. They have microphones so we can hear what they're saying, and then we analyze their work to be able to know what works, what didn't work, what support do they need, and so on and so forth. So that was my big project in 2017. And then over the years, especially in 2019, my biggest takeaway was it's really hard to teach a design challenge. It's a challenge for the teacher, and the teacher in this laboratory, although there's a main faculty professor, the graduate teaching assistants are the leads in teaching these laboratory activities or the design challenge. And in fact, when we try this out, so before we implement this in a real classroom, we had to try this out in the form of a usability test. It's basically measuring user experience. We had to try this out with a subset, a group of students, maybe 10 of them. And I take the role of the TA, and then they are my student. And even me, with my experience in chemistry, with the one who led the development of the DC, it's hard to teach this. So I thought, as part of my dissertation, I'm gonna support and prepare GTAs for teaching design challenges and other teaching materials in various departments. So that was 2019 when I started working with graduate teaching assistants and gaining their trust, making friends, doing activities, basically when we started the learning community. That was August of 2019. And then all of the STEM TLC activities were interrupted because, guess what? COVID-19. From January, so it started August 2019. The professional learning community went over a year. So January to July 2020, maybe not so much January, but especially March to July, we had so much difficulty meeting. You would think that, you know, hey, that's America, you have good internet access. You're actually wrong. I mean, what good is an internet connectivity if you cannot design tasks very well in an online environment? And then it was a shock for all of us, right? Like, we were so used in meeting together, doing the activities, really like, you know, pipetting and doing all the activities in person. And then we have to move online. So it's black and white. It's either we can do it or we can't. So I had to, being the facilitator of the STEM TLC, find ways to make it work online, virtually. One, because it was my dissertation, it was my research, and two, because the GTAs are already interested in it, they're starting to develop interest in model-based learning. So I developed a lot of activities. It was trial and error. And the main purpose of the learning community is to, one, make them experience MDR as students. For example, they take the role of students and then they do activities. And then the second portion is to make them plan, create a lesson plan that is based on model-based reasoning, now as teachers. So they play two roles. So I thought it'd be interesting to design activities that they can do, that we each can do in our own homes, and then we meet virtually. So I'm only gonna describe two activities that I designed and facilitated through STEM TLC. So the first one is called the Cheerios Effect. So what happened was, I told them that you act as students and then you perform the following activities before we started planning for model-based reasoning. So this is one of the activities that they did. So I gave them one-page task, and it's actually about what happens to Cheerios in milk. So I'm gonna play the video. If you drop cereal in a bowl of milk, what do you think happens? I mean, it's a very simple, you think about it, it's a simple task. However, it's interesting because Cheerios started to clump together in the surface of the liquid. So we started the discussion, the whys and the da-da-da. And to structure the experience, I gave them an activity sheet, and then they can do whatever experiment they want. The video at the bottom is actually another experiment that they suggested doing, meaning it's a proof of concept. Different bowl material, different liquid, different stuff on the surface of the liquid, and the thumbtacks are still clumping together. So I told them, draw the model, given these requirements, test your model, discuss, test your ideas by doing more experiments, whatever you want, and then create a consensus model to explain what happens to Cheerios in milk. So that's the model-based reasoning part. Use a model to explain a phenomenon. So what are the parts of this task? It's very simple. However, if you think closely, you have a real-world problem. It's not a societal problem. It's not a huge problem, but it's still a real-world phenomenon. It happens every day. The second one, I allowed them to construct their own model, whether it be a drawing, a computer simulation, whatever they think about, as long as that model can help them think about the phenomenon. And then the third one, through discussions, and whenever they see discrepancies between what they think and what happens, the modeling process was supported. It's an iterative cycle of model construction, model refinement, testing, and so on and so forth. So we did the whole thing. Very simple experiment, but it supported a lot of discussion. And then the second type of task, I'm showing you this task because this may give you ideas on what activities to give your students. I know that for younger set of students, maybe this is not as interesting, but for graduate teaching assistants who are chemists and material science engineers, they were really interested in the whys of these phenomena. So the second activity is called the kitchen material. Basically, why are your kitchen materials made of some type of material? So for example, why is a frying pan made of alloy of metal? Why is a, how do you call that, a ladle can be made of wood, either wood or polymers? Why is your coaster made of ceramic? Why is a silicone mat used for whatever purpose? So basically, just think about your kitchen materials. There's a reason why those materials are being used. And in the same manner, I gave them the task, they did the experiment. We basically went to our kitchen, did our experiment while on Zoom, and then we talked about it. So the video will show you that ice melts quickly, very quickly in metals, but the rate of melting is different with different materials. And this can be explained, for example, using thermal conductivity. That's just one of the many explanations for this phenomenon. In the same manner, this task is composed of a real-world problem, model construction, and modeling process. So those are two among the other many tasks that we did to help them understand MDR as learners. But then my main purpose is to really help them be teachers. And what is one of the many tasks of teachers? To create a lesson plan, whether it be a written lesson plan or, a plan for an activity for a day or a week and so on and so forth. So for some teachers, they are required to really create a structured lesson plan. But for college students, teachers of college and undergrad students, usually you're not required to create a structured lesson plan. However, in my learning community, I trained them to start thinking about lesson planning. So I provided them with a very simple, the table on the right hand side of the slide. It's a very simple structure that could help them think about how to create a lesson. First stage, identify the learning results. So start with the goal in mind. What do you want your students to learn? Describe who your students are, describe the context, establish the goals of the learning. And as teachers, we all know learning goals should be measurable. It shouldn't be very vague. In fact, specific goals are encouraged. And then identify essential questions that you want your students to answer, because that's a core concept of model-based reasoning. And then stage 2, determine what is an acceptable evidence of learning. How would you know if your students learn? Well, if they answer the exam right. That's actually not the best evidence for learning. So you have to identify what learning means in the context of your activity, your whatever you plan for. It can be quizzes, exam worksheets, or it can be authentic forms of, assessment, authentic assessment. Like if I give you this question, provide your answer by using the model. So model-based reasoning. Argue, provide an argumentation, using claim, evidence, reasoning, so on and so forth. There are various authentic forms of assessment. And then stage 3, which is the fun part, is to design and to stage your activities. What are they going to do first, second, third, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I taught and I helped the graduate teaching assistants create a lesson plan. And how I wish we would have moved this further into them really teaching the lesson, but that was beyond the scope of my my study. However, they have their lesson plans. They are the future leaders of the academe. So in their future profession, they can actually start with whatever lesson plan they created in that learning community and use that to further their career, for example. That was my hope. All right, very briefly, I'm gonna discuss about the findings. I hope you're still okay. We are nearing the end of my talk. And actually, this is the most important part, the findings. So remember when I said sense making is a process of one, I said your research should be theoretically grounded. Even your presentation of your findings, even the way I presented my findings, I still use the sense making and organization perspective. So because it's a process, it has input, output, and then conditions of the process. So the meaning made, that's the output. I'm presenting the output first. So what are the actions? What are the decisions that the graduate teaching assistants produced or used or showed as part of their, as a result of their activities, And then what are the factors that they needed to consider, or they said they have to consider, or that I observed that they've been considering while learning and while planning for MDR. And then the third set of findings is, what are the conditions, what are the circumstances or state of the process that when you remove it, makes the process or changes the process. So think about this as, so I always think about this in terms of, again, a chemical reaction. You have input, you have your products or your reactants, your products, and then the conditions are, you know, your pH, your temperature, so on and so forth. But if you change the pH of a reaction, the reaction changes. If you change the temperature, it changes. So that was how it was my thinking when I analyzed my data. Right, so first research question, how do GTAs as learners, when they perform the activities, come to know about MDR? So actually, MDR is inherent in them. They may not know that it's called model-based reasoning, but because they are science experts and engineering experts, modeling, models, model-based reasoning is actually something that is close to their heart. So if you're a science expert here, if you're, you've been working in the laboratory, you have been doing model-based reasoning. You may or may not know about the term itself. It may not be explicit, but that's what you do. And I observed that the GTAs, it was inherent in them. And it was, I did not have to instruct them to, you know, go construct another model or do another test. They basically, it was smooth. When you give them a problem, what they do is a cyclic process of constructing something, testing it, doing more predictions, so on and so forth. So it was inherent in them. And then the factors that they needed to consider, they just needed to see something familiar. Oh, this is something that I do in the laboratory. Therefore, you know, I can do this. And then what are the conditions they need in the learning community? Because I gave them real world experience, they needed to be diverse in terms of expertise. So when you put all chemists together, of course, they talk about intermolecular forces of attraction. However, if you put an engineer would talk about, you know, more physical properties, say thermal conductivity, or let's try metal. So if you remember the experiment Cheerios, it was actually the engineer who suggested dumping thumbtacks, like metal coated with plastic cover or coating, and then they tried the experiment, so on and so forth. So a diverse expertise within your professional development or learning community is very helpful. And then the second and more important, well, equally important research question is, how did they come to plan, or how did they create lesson plans, which are model-based reasoning? In the same manner, I organized this in terms of the three things. So because they are not trained to do lesson plans, and because they think that they are not teachers, so there are many factors what they did was to only incorporate some features of MBR in their lesson. And the main reason is, while I'm only a GTA, I cannot fully redesign the current chemistry activity or the current material science activity. So they incorporated some features into the current tasks. And then number two, they think that developing partnerships with faculty would best support them in planning lessons for model-based reasoning, which is basically these GTAs calling out for help and support from other faculty members. And what are the factors that I observed? And then based on interviews, they told me are important. First is their beliefs. If you don't believe that MBR is a thing, then you're not going to change your practice. And then beliefs about how students learn. Most of the science teachers, they think that learning is about lecturing. They give you the information, you get the information, and then that's it. But model-based reasoning is the total opposite of that. You give full authority to your students. And if the members of the learning community are resistive against that, then nothing's going to happen. However, the GTAs, they know that passive learning is not the way. Why? Because they've been students. They've been in the laboratory. So they know that doing it themselves, more student-centered learning, is actually a better way of learning. So that's why I didn't have a hard time in making them plan for MBR. And then the last one, perceived role in the department, was the one that hindered the process the most. Why? Because according to them, and this is supported by the literature, they are not teachers. That the faculty thinks they're not actually teachers. They are assistant to the faculty, which I would argue is not true, because you're in front of the student, you're leading the whole thing, and then you just report to your professor whatever happened that day. You are the authority in the classroom. You're teaching, you're helping them learn. Therefore, you are teaching. However, the TAs did not think of themselves as teachers. So that was the only factor that was hindering the process. And then what were the conditions? First condition is they must know that MBR, whatever they're doing, has an impact on their student. So whatever sophisticated professional development we do, unless the teachers recognize the impact on the student, then it's hard for a PD to be effective. And then second important factor, the teacher, the GTA in this case, they need to acknowledge a need for change. And this was not very hard because pandemic. They needed to change the materials. They needed to change how they teach online. So it was actually a little bit supportive of the goal of this professional development. And then the other condition is being part of a learning community. Teachers, although they are sometimes resistive, but they actually like learning with others, learning with co-teachers, learning with their peers. And I say peers because all of them are, equal. They're all graduate teaching assistant. I didn't include faculty or professors. So authority is equally distributed, and they like that. All right, we're actually about to end. So to conclude, hello? Yeah, anyway, so to conclude, I'm gonna go back to my sense-making and organization perspective. And for graduate teaching assistants, they needed to recognize familiar context to be able to adopt model-based reasoning. They needed to, they need their perception about who they are in the department or in the university, in their workplace, should align with the goals of the learning community. And then individually, their teaching beliefs and their beliefs about how students learn should also be taken into consideration for sense making to happen. Putting that all together, the output is one, inherent, MBR is actually inherent in graduate teaching assistants or in teachers who are expert in their fields. And then two, incorporating MBR. Lesson planning means only incorporating MBR and not fully changing a lesson plan or an activity or a lesson. And then three, the output is they realized that they needed to partner with faculty in some form of collaboration to help them prepare for MBR lessons. All right, so going back to our topic, to our theme, academic resilience in these trying times through unity, understanding, cooperation, and transformative leadership. This is so, again, very timely because teachers are the leaders in education. All that we are doing as researchers is supportive of transforming these teachers into knowing that they are leaders and becoming leaders. So that was why I called my professional development building capacity for teaching, building capacity for teachers through a learning community as one of the forms of professional development. And using learning community as a professional development would, one, provide an opportunity for teachers to learn about evidence-based teaching frameworks, any of those, inquiry-based, modeling, whatever teaching framework. And for my experience, for my research, it's model-based reasoning. And number two, learning community also provides opportunity for collaboration. They collaborate with their peers, they collaborate with faculty. And then third, it provides opportunity for them to gain mastery of instructional skills or pedagogical skills through practice-based training. They actually do create lesson plans within the learning community. So it's practice-based teaching or training. And then the last one, in a learning community, it provides opportunity. It could actually provide opportunity to partner with faculty as another form of professional support. Although for my study, we did not include faculty. That was one of the limitations of my study due to various reasons. So we did not partner with faculty. However, the GTAs were saying that they need collaborations and support from the faculty. So that's my talk, and thank you so much for your time and for listening. Right, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Imperial, for a very inspiring speech. And I personally learned a lot about how important it is to ground our research to theory. When I was still undergraduate, I had difficulty understanding what theoretical framework really is. And it is only when I entered my master's degree that I somehow understood. But still today, I'm still struggling to grasp about how theoretical framework really helps research and what is its role there and all of that. And I hope that our students and participants learned from that very wonderful, inspiring, at the same time, an informative presentation from our keynote speaker. Especially the discussion on sense making. As a trainer myself, thank you so much, Dr. Imperial, for sharing that framework of looking at professional development in that perspective. I never had that thought before, to actually look into sense making as a perspective at looking at impact of professional development activities. And thank you so much for sharing that to us. And at this point, perhaps some of our participants, co-faculty, have questions or comments, clarifications with regards to the keynote speech of Dr. Imperial. You can also use the Google chat to air out your comments and questions. And for our YouTube Live viewers, you can chat your questions on the comment section as well. Do we have questions from the YouTube Live?
There's a question in the chat box. You want me to read?
Yes, Dr. Imperial, go ahead.
This is from Joshua Barsumo. May I ask, I feel that one of the biggest hurdles right now, because everything is online, is gaining the cooperation of our respondents. The biggest hurdle. What advice might you give us to address this problem? For example, in our research on political literacy, we're concerned about making sure that respondents don't look up the correct answers for our research survey so that our data won't be skewed. All right, so first thing that I see is the word correct. So I learned basically with the introduction that Professor Canelita provided, I came from chemistry and then moved to collaborated with education and then switched ultimately to science education. And because of my training in the sciences, I always think that there's a correct answer to a survey, to an exam, to a research. And then my professor, my advisor, continuously tells me, avoid using the word correct. If you think that your survey is designed for a correct answer, then perhaps think about redesigning it. What I'm saying is, one way you can do that is to redesign your questions so that you get the honest experience or opinion or perspective of your respondents and not a correct answer. If you can do that, then that would be great. Second, in terms of cooperation or the number of your respondents, I actually don't have a specific answer, but in my, in my experience, developing relationships with them. So depending on your research, if it's quantitative and you basically want to give them surveys, one-time survey or, surveys across a time period, you really have to reach out to your respondents. If there's a lot of them, then try to make connections. Try to chat with them if that's possible. But basically communicating with them and explaining to them in the best way you can the purpose of your study. Because, people, I know responding to survey is a lot of tasks for most people. However, if they see the value of your research, then they'd actually do it. Just explain why you're doing it, why are they involved, and what do they gain? Not in terms of, compensation, but, what is the big picture purpose of the research? So those are my two responses. First, maybe think about redesigning your survey and target and avoid correct answers, and to communicate with your sample or population or target sample, if possible, make connections, and then make them know the purpose of your research. I hope that answers your question, Joshua Barsumo.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Imperial and Sir Joshua, for raising a very relevant question. Thank you so much. Do we have questions from the YouTube Live? I think as of this moment, wala pa tayong questions. How about from our co-faculty attending our Google Meet? Perhaps you can give comment. to Dr. Imperial's speech.
Those interested in research or professional development, this is time for discussion.
Yeah. All right. We have a
Neil
question.
last is his
Yes.
hand. Yeah, Neil.
Sir Neil, you are recognized.
Hi, hello, good morning. First of all, I want to congratulate my high school classmate. Lorelai,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thanks, Neil.
And what else? So my question is, did you encounter any resistance from did your graduate teaching assistants or did your GTA district encounter any resistance from the model-based reasoning that they tried to implement in class? Because maybe some students are more used to lecture types, and so this additional work is not so comfortable to them. Thank you.
Thank you
And
for your
congratulations again.
salamat, Neil. Actually, we call him Lasta, but I'll call him Neil. I think at some point in my talk, I mentioned the TAs actually did not teach the lesson plans that they created. However, within and among the TAs themselves, I did encounter a lot of resistance. And based on my experience with PDs and the literature, it's common. Teachers actually resist for various reasons. I did not mention this, but I started with 22 teachers, I think, or 20-something teachers, both from chemistry and material science. And then, as you see, I ended up with 5 teachers because most of them stopped participating for various reasons. Some of them actually graduated the fall of 2019. So wala na sila naka-join sa 2020. But then I still had a lot of teachers, a lot of GTAs resisting, I would say, not mainly because of MBR, but basically time was the enemy. Busy young grad students, like all teachers, and then they don't have time to attend PD sessions and so on and so forth. So mo na akong resistance. Now, in terms of student resistance, again, we did not get any data from the students with the PD that I did. However, if you remember, I talked about Change Chem Lab. Actually, Change Chem Lab, the activities there are model-based reasoning activities. Ang kanang design challenge, they were model-based activities. We had several studies in the form of surveys. I interviewed students. Then again, we videotape them, so we have observation data. And students don't resist. However, they have varied interest in performing the model-based reasoning activities. However, because, according to the engineers, because they see themselves as practicing engineers, they feel like engineers, quote unquote, they feel like practicing engineers, their interest is enhanced. Mas naganahan sila with the model-based reasoning activity because they see an engineering problem. So, for example, we made them create thermal conductivity materials. Materials that store solar energy, various materials like concrete, whatever, mixture of materials. So, and then they tested it for a bigger engineering problem. And they liked it. They liked solving engineering problems. So, according to them, based on surveys namong na gather, collaboration and feeling like engineer in a chem lab is enhancing their motivation and their interest in doing the model-based reasoning activity. So that's a different study. Sana siya sa mga research nga among gibuhat, but we didn't really get any resistance per se. However, with the PD that I presented, yes, daghan ko resistance nga na-encounter from the GTAs. I hope that answered your question, Neil.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Neil, for raising your question, and Dr. Imperial for providing us a very good and informative answer. Ma'am Imperial,
Yes.
a comment or question? I was interested on the chem change, right?
Change chem.
Change chem, sorry. And you made mention that it was design, the design challenges, right? So I also encountered design thinking very recently, and I had a training also, but we were not able to complete it very thoroughly. May I ask your comment about how is this related, since I believe in the US, design thinking also has a counterpart in engineering design process. So how is this related to those concepts?
So again, the development of change chem, the design challenges, is separate study. So manang wala kay nako di integrate, because this is my current study that I talked about is on the teacher side. So this is a very different study. However, for the curriculum development part of change chem, indeed we use engineering design process is one of our frameworks. So the rationale behind was, one, we're dealing with engineering students. Early on, first year, engineering students, first semester na nila, of course, they're very, hyped up, they have so much ideals. And then they encounter, forgive me if I say this, however, this is also supported in the literature. They encounter a very unwelcoming nature of introductory courses like Gen Chem. Lisod daw ang change chem. And some of them treat change chem, or the literature actually supports that, not change chem, introductory courses like chemistry, they call it, how do you call that? Gatekeeper courses. Kay, weed out courses. Bagsak ka og first nimo nga chem nga course, that's it. Although you're an aspiring engineer. So we integrated an engineering design process. So the cycle, the iterative cycle of designing a solution, testing your solution, refining your solution, and then reconstructing a design, your solution to a problem, and so on and so forth in the in the chemistry laboratory. That's why ang isa ka design challenge namo, it takes about 3 weeks to complete. So we have 3 phases of the design challenge. We call it the first day, which is a 3-hour period, the design day. Second day, following week, is the conduct day. And the third week is the analyze day. So magbalik-balik na, they're given the freedom to test their solution until the team, usually 3 students in one engineering team, they come up with their final solution. It may not be the correct solution. Again, we avoid using the word correct, but it's the best fit model. It's the best fit solution for the given problem. So, muna siya ang engineering design process within that chemistry laboratory. So, it's not really an engineering lab. So, I'm gonna, how do you call this? It's not an engineering lab, it's still a chemistry lab, but we incorporated an engineering design process in finding a solution to a problem. And then in finding that solution, we use chemistry concepts. So that's why I said it's marrying chemistry and engineering together. I hope that answered your question, sir.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Lorelai, for that answer. And I think at this point, We have one more comment. Let's cater this from All Feature Coronado. Richard Feynman is definitely one of the best teachers in the entire human history. When asked about his teaching style, he said non-verbatim, "I do not follow any style." His teaching style was definitely more on the chaotic side. He might do math approach, and then he might suddenly switch to a more historical approach. Lesson plans seem to be linear to show physics interconnectivity. But I think it's also difficult to do science with something chaotic. What is your opinion on this, Dr. Lorelai?
Wow, that makes teaching really hard. It's not linear. It is actually chaotic. However, as teachers, we have to lessen the chaos, structure it a little bit to help the learning process. So that's a big task. So I'm going to say no, a linear teaching method. Linear meaning if I do this, then this means that this happens. That's a no-no in teaching. That's actually a passive way to learn. If I teach them A and B, and then I ask them what is A and B, that's a linear way of teaching. That's a no-no because you're stating facts. That's all. It's passive. And giving them an unstructured activity is also too much of a chaos. So depending on who your students are, K through 12 or undergrad, maybe chaos can be accommodated in higher education a little bit, but my suggestion would be one of the suggestions actually in the literature is called scaffolding and then fading. So at the beginning, scaffold it, structure it a little bit, but not linear. Provide them with the right amount of structure. So A, B, C, D, what they do, how they interpret data, and then fade. Remove that scaffold, give them a real problem, see how it works. So that's actually a very authentic way because we learn by doing that in, at least sa akong experience in the laboratory. At first, you are trained how to operate this, how to conduct an experiment, and then you're given your research project, and then everything is chaotic, but you still learn. So that's one form of teaching. So to Sir Al Fisher, somewhere between linear and chaotic, I think is, like what I said, scaffold and then fade. Provide the right amount of structure, slowly fade that structure until you see that kaya sa inyong students to respond to a problem, a real world problem, for example. And that would actually entail, and I agree with Dr. Richard Feynman, various teaching strategies, not just one. You know, you'd probably do this one day and then the other day and so on and so forth. But at least you as a teacher, naka-structure, naka-scaffold, we call it scaffold, and then eventually slowly fade that scaffold. I don't know if I answered that question, but you know, there's really not one way to teach. It's chaotic.
Yes. Yeah. I think, yeah, Al Fisher, yeah, I agree with you that a little bit of chaos, but for me, I would not use chaos, like siguro openness of the activity.
Yeah.
No? It's open for anything. So yeah, it can promote creativity. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lorelai Imperial. Let's give
Thank you so
Lorelai
much,
a round of
everyone.
applause. And at this point, allow me to present to our keynote speaker certificate of appreciation, which reads, Certificate, the Mindanao State University Iligan Institute of Technology College of Education presents this certificate of recognition to Dr. Lorelai Imperial for sharing her knowledge and expertise as keynote speaker during the 37th Foundation Day Anniversary Research Colloquium on academic resilience during the pandemic of the College of Education, given this 17th day of March, 2021, at the MSU-IIT Iligan City, signed by the Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Amelia T. Buwan, and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Franco G. Tebes. Once again, Dr. Imperial, thank you so much for your keynote speech.
Thank you. Thank you sa inyo tanan, and how I wish I could like physically receive the certificate. It's very pretty and really signed by Dean Amy, Mom Amy, and Dr. Tebes. So thank you. I appreciate you inviting me through Professor Canalita. Thank you so much for your time. If namoy questions, reach out to me. Some faculty in the College of Education and IDS, they have my email address. Email me, Facebook, whatever. Just reach out if you need any help, any advice, or you just want to talk about anything. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Imperial, for your kind efforts to also give us support. Salamat kaayo. And at this point, I would like to inform our audience that both our breakout rooms will also have live sessions on YouTube. The links can be found on the current live YouTube description. All right, so I hope to see you in a few minutes in the respective breakout rooms. And this is Janil Medina, your facilitator. Thank you so much for joining us in this plenary session.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 37th CED Foundation Day Celebration Research Colloquium with the theme Academic Resilience in These Trying Times Through Unity, Understanding, Cooperation, and Transformative Leadership. My name is Hazel Dwight B. Bendong, and I am your moderator in the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Research Cluster. Before we officially start the presentation of the research studies, I would like to remind everyone to fill up the attendance form by clicking the link found in the chat section. And for us to experience a harmonious and orderly research forum, I would like to read to you some of our few house rules. In the Google Meet, please refrain from opening your camera unless requested. Please keep your microphone off to avoid unnecessary background noise to interfere with the proceeding. Attendance links are provided in the Google Meet chat and the YouTube live comment section. And to get your certificate of attendance, please fill up the evaluation form shortly before we end our activity. And also, we encourage everyone to ask questions and give comments or feedback only after each presentation. For the presenters, you are reminded that you only have 10 minutes time for presentation. There is a 5-minute allotment for questions and comments. And please be on the meeting room at least 10 minutes before the start of your respective breakout sessions. To start, let me introduce the first presenters with the research title Mosquito Sterilization via Sterile Insect Technique Irradiation using Gamma and Ultraviolet Light. This research study will be presented by Ram Nico U. De Lejero, John Hardy G. Cabibil, and Ben James T. Quahotor. Presenters, you may now start.
Good day, everyone. I am Ram Nico U. De Lejero, together with John Hardy G. Cabibil and Ben James T. Quahotor, and we are the researchers of the research paper entitled Mosquito Sterilization via Sterile Insect Technique Irradiation, or SIT, using Gamma and Ultraviolet Light, of the Integrated Developmental School of MSU-IIT.
Nowadays, mosquitoes predominantly swarm households and institutions carrying with them maladies such as malaria, dengue, and Zika virus. According to the City Health Office of Iligan, for 10 years from 2010 to 2019, the total number of dengue cases in the city already reached a peak of 8,466. Mosquito-borne diseases have been one of the major problems in almost all tropical and subtropical countries, including the Philippines. Because of this, many inventions, innovations, and tests have been researched through mosquito population restraint to counter such problems. Hence, following the mechanisms behind the sterile insect technique irradiation, the study Mosquito Sterilization via Sterile Insect Technique Irradiation using Gamma and Ultraviolet Light will investigate the proficiency and effectiveness of SIT conducted to mosquitoes through two different types and varying time exposures of radiation. Specifically, it aims to determine the mortality rate of male mosquitoes before and after exposure to radiation, determine the larval count of mosquito offspring as a result of the irradiation procedure, determine any significant difference in the larval count between the two radiation types, and determine any significant difference between the sterility or larval count to the amount of irradiation exposure.
This study was focused on stability potential of two highly energetic waves belonging in the upper segment of the electromagnetic spectrum, viz. The gamma and the ultraviolet radiation. Pupil specimen was being subjected to this radiation at varying time exposure to induce sterility, and upon reaching the adult phase, it was then bred to the unradiated female mosquitoes to test its sterility through the viable offspring count. Another specimen will be held unradiated, which will undergo the same process as the unradiated pupil specimen. Shown here is the conceptual framework of the study. Materials are first gathered and subjected to the initial culture of the pupae, then sex identification before it will or will not be subjected to radiation source. Breeding of the specimen will be done, and the success of it will be evaluated in the sterility test. For cases of mortality in pupae brought by the spontaneous and overexposure to radiation, the setup must be repeated from the initial culture. In sterility tests, in case of the presence of viable offspring due to premature radiation, the setup must be repeated to be subjected to irradiation till it meets the maximum dosage. Larval formation has served to be the basis whether the type of radiation has high sterility potential at given time exposure. The first phase of the experiment is the initial culture and collecting setup. In a collecting setup, a large water container was filled with water, placed on a shady site for 5 days, and be subjected to initial culture. Collected mosquito larvae was then transferred to a covered aquarium tank to continue its growth to pupal stage. Aquarium pellets were then added, which serve as food for the developing larvae. The setup has been monitored for 3 to 5 days until the larvae were now in the pupal stage. Next phase is the sex identification. Sex of the mosquitoes were determined at the pupal stage in the following ways. Males were relatively smaller than female in the pupal stage. Female have bolder colors than males, which are pale, and through genital lobes of the mosquito pupae. Subsequently, separate the male and female and maintain a ratio of 2:1 male to female. The third phase, irradiated and unradiated setup. Pupae of mosquitoes were manually separated based on its sex, maintaining a 7:14 male to female ratio, and into 3 treatments where one was exposed to gamma treatment and in ultraviolet treatment, then the rest of the males was left unexposed. Time exposure to the radiation was being varied to each treatment, maintaining a constant wavelength. Female pupae were left untouched, divided into 3 setups with 3 corresponding trials. These separated pupae were placed on a petri dish, 3/4 filled with distilled water in preparation for the irradiation stage for male. After the irradiation, male mosquito pupae are left to acclimate before it is transferred to a clean petri dish with water. Lastly, the fourth phase, breeding setup and sterility test. Irradiated pupae was then placed to a clean petri dish filled with water along with unradiated females. Let gamma-exposed males and unexposed females be pupae series A. Same goes to others as pupae series B for UV and pupae series C for unradiated males. After all the pupae turned into adult phase, change the water in the petri dish to remove residual chrysalis. Banana peelings were then added, which serve as the food supply for the mosquitoes. For the females to lay eggs, 5 ml of mice blood was soaked in a cotton ball and was placed at the bottom of the breeding cage. Leave the setup for 2 weeks and monitor any signs of larval development. If the treatment yields 100% inviable offspring for the 3 trials, then the radiation is effective to sterilize male mosquitoes. If the treatment yields inviable but has viable offsprings, repeat the irradiation setup and increase the time exposure or the dosage of radiation. If the treatment yields 100% viable offspring at the maximum exposure and dosage, then the radiation is considered ineffective. The table format as being displayed shows the theoretical comparison of the data gathered, where Table 1 intends to compare the relationship of the mortality rate of male mosquitoes after the irradiation from different types of radiation and varying time exposure. Table 2 for the comparison of the number of viable offspring at different types of radiation with varying exposure. Lastly, Table 3 observes the relationship between the mortality rate of the mosquitoes to the number of viable offspring at different types of radiation with varying time exposure.
In the findings and analysis of data, the researchers summarized them into 3 tables. The first table showed the comparison on the number of male mosquito deaths or the mortality rate after irradiation at different types of radiation with varying time exposures. Since the control group obviously did not undergo irradiation, thus there is no value for the mortality. But as reflected in the table, we see that in the first R using gamma radiation, the mean value is 0. Thus, still, there are no mosquito deaths. But as we traverse along with increasing exposure time, we found out that the mean deaths also increase. Therefore, the higher the wavelength of the radiation, the higher will be the mortality rate. This is further supported by the study Lethal Effects on Short Wavelength Visible Light on Insects by Masatoshi Hori on 2014, wherein increasing the number of photons in wavelengths ranging from 378 to 508 nanometers also increased insect mortality. With the second table, we show the comparison on the number of viable offspring or the sterility test at different types of radiation with varying time exposures. Again, the controlled setup quantified the largest since the setup underwent the natural process without any interference of radiation. As you can see, mean values in the gamma radiation setup entailed a more likely sterility test findings when compared to the UV radiation result. This occurrence can be amplified with the study the sterile insect technique for controlling populations of Aedes albopictus on Reunion Island mating vigor of sterilized males, in which the same gamma radiation source was used, and the results showed that the females inseminated during the mating period were completely sterile. For the last table, we showed the results gathered using the independent sample t-test on the comparison of the number of viable offspring or sterility test at different types of radiation with varying time exposures. At this point, we compared the results from the gamma radiation to the results gathered from the ultraviolet radiation at each hour of both radiation. And the results from the independent sample t-test vividly dictate that there are significant differences in each of the varying time exposures when both results from the radiation sources are compared, as shown that their p-values are less than the level of significance alpha 0.05.
Based from the findings in the study, the researchers concluded the following. Due to the fact that the ultraviolet radiation has a higher wavelength than gamma radiation, independent with time, there is a bigger mortality rate of male mosquitoes in the prior. This can be explained that even though setups of male mosquitoes were placed under irradiation at the same time exposure and same treatment, the setup under the UV radiation gave rise to a more number of dead male mosquitoes. But with the effects of UV radiation on the mortality rate of male mosquitoes, this does not justify the fact that there were lesser number of larvae formed after the process. Gamma radiation, for instance, was the one who gave a better result in the sterility of viable offspring. Certainly, there is a significant difference in the larval count between the two radiation types, especially when they are compared per hour of irradiation exposure, knowing that gamma radiation produces lesser number of larvae than UV. This can be implied that although gamma is more reactive and dangerous than the ultraviolet radiation, future researchers about this study can certainly pave way for it to aid to the steepening of the curve of mosquito population.
Thank you, presenters. That was a very informative study. As we all know, we are experiencing problems with mosquitoes, especially since these insects are responsible for spreading malaria in humans and even dengue. And these mosquitoes are active during nighttime, even dawn and dusk. So at this point, we are going to cater questions from the audiences. So you can type the questions in our chat section, or you can also type your questions in the YouTube live comment section. Or if you would like to ask questions verbally, you can click the raise hand option here in the Google Meet for you to be recognized. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Sir Nilasta, you are recognized. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Ma'am Hazel. Can I ask the researchers about the practicality of the results of this research? Can we possibly create a device that uses radiation to reduce the population of mosquitoes?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. Am I heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. That, sir, is actually that is beyond our research study, but we have stated it in the recommendation that maybe we can create those professionals and scientists, engineers, they can create something that is based on this kind of technique. But I can suggest that we can utilize also X-ray radiation. But so far, we haven't seen any kind of probable product that can be formed by this technique so far, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ram, for answering the question of Sir Neil. Okay, what about the audience from the YouTube? Are there any questions raised? Okay, no questions. So I would like to ask a question for our presenters. I'm just curious, what specific type of mosquito did you use in the experiment? Is it the Anopheles mosquito or the Aedes mosquito?
Good morning, ma'am. Based on our scope and limitations, we haven't because we do not have that kind of, you know, very high tech stuff about this. Kung pipili ka ng anong type mosquito, but we kind of assume that it will be between those two, ma'am.
Okay, between
But rest,
Anopheles and
yes, ma'am. Because our research also, our literatures and other studies also reflect those two types of mosquitoes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ram, for that answer. Any questions from the audience? No more questions. So if you have questions to the presenters, please preserve those questions, and if there will be time left at the end, then we will entertain your questions later. So at this point, allow me to present the certificate to our first presenters. Yes?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. I would like to add something, ma'am, regarding the question of Sir Neil, ma'am, about sir. What's your question again, sir?
So my question was, can we utilize this newfound knowledge and apply it? I'm just thinking about the safety of using radiation, harmful radiation, to kill mosquitoes.
Okay, sir. In response to that, sir, recently, sir, sterile insect technique has been used in some parts of the world, sir, to reduce mosquito population, sir. But it is not recommendable as of now, sir. We cannot recommend it probably now, sir, because it will not be commercially used, sir, since the radiation requires expertise in handling, sir. So if improper handling, sir, like we tend to irradiate more mosquitoes, or like the irradiation is being used commercially, then there might be negative effect with the biodiversity and the ecosystem, sir, since mosquito is a big part of our ecosystem.
Thank you. I think Ma'am Hazel will agree with your answer regarding biodiversity.
Yes, thank you, sir. I also, ma'am, about your question, ma'am, Aedes aegyptis and other species of mosquito, ma'am. I would like to add something. Excuse me, ma'am, am I heard, ma'am?
Yes, John Hardy.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. The species of mosquitoes, ma'am, is not based on our scope and limitation, ma'am. It is not included, ma'am, with the species of mosquitoes we are handling. But it is, as Ram said, ma'am, it is recommended to be specific with the kind of mosquito being used for accuracy, ma'am, sa result. So that's all, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John Hardy, for the clarification.
Okay, ma'am.
So, at this point, we are going to present the certificates to our presenters. So, let me read to you dissertation. Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology, College of Education presents this certificate of recognition to Ram Nico U. De Lejero for sharing his knowledge and expertise as presenter during the 37th Foundation Day Anniversary Research Colloquium on Academic Resilience during the pandemic of the College of Education, given the 17th day of March 2021 at the MSU-IIT Iligan City, signed by our Dean of the College of Education, Amelia T. Buan, and our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Franco G. Teves. Another certificate of recognition is presented to John Hardy G. Kabibil and Ben James T. Quahotor. A round of virtual applause, please. Moving on, our next study will be presented by our next presenter from program. Our next study will be presented by Theodore Vincent M. Mejorada, Jazen T. Giganto, and Micaela Helene Grace A. Apila with the research study phytochemical screening, antibacterial and anti-hyperglycemic activities of the ethanolic extract of the aerial part of Huachichao, Orthosiphon aristatus and Mus musculus. Presenters, you may now start.
A pleasant morning to you all. Today, we will be presenting our research study entitled Phytochemical Screening, Antibacterial, and Anti-Hyperglycemic Activities of the Ethanolic Extract of the Aerial Part of Huachichao, Orthosiphon aristatus, on Mus musculus. Orthosiphon aristatus, or commonly known as Huachichao or Balbas pusa, is widely used in pharmacological practices, and it is valuable for its many therapeutic properties. Now, it is fair to wonder why we choose this particular study to deal with. Here is the answer. First, plants have a variety of medicinal properties. Considering the economic level of the people, and that there is a rising cost of medicine and medical treatments, many of the people shift to natural medicine. It is also cheaper and more sustainable. Second, there is less information specifically on the aerial part of the plant Orthosiphon aristatus. Third, Staphylococcus aureus and Escherichia coli are the most well-known pathogen responsible for severe infection and loss of life. In that sense, it is really important to know if there is any antibacterial resistance of the plant. And lastly, Diabetes mellitus is one of the most common chronic metabolic disorder characterized by hyperglycemia. The prevalence of diabetes in the Philippines is increasing, so it is important to determine if there is a potential anti-hyperglycemic activity of the plant. Now, these are the objectives of the study. First is to obtain ethanolic extract from the air-dried plant sample Orthosiphon aristatus. Second is to investigate the anti-hyperglycemic activity of the ethanolic extract of the air part of the plant sample Orthosiphon aristatus using the oral glucose tolerance test method. Third is to test the antibacterial activity of the ethanolic extract using the paper disc diffusion method against the representative microorganisms Staphylococcus aureus and Escherichia coli. And lastly, to qualitatively determine the possible phytochemical constituents of the plant Orthosiphon aristatus using phytochemical screening method. Now that we are familiar with the background and the objective of the study, let us move on to the next part.
And now I'm going to proceed to our overall flowchart of our experiment. As you can see in here, first thing that we did was the collection of our plant sample, the Orthosiphon aristatus. After being collected, it was then air dried at a room temperature for about 2 to 4 weeks. We then proceeded to the grinding and soaking the plant sample within ethanol alcohol. Ethanolic extraction was then performed in the biochemistry laboratory using a rotary evaporator. The crude ethanolic extract that was collected was used for the phytochemical screening, antibacterial activity screening, and the anti-hyperglycemic activity screening of our plant sample. And before doing the anti-hyperglycemic activity screening, first thing that we did was the collection of 35 female white mice, specifically the 7 to 12 weeks old first generation female white mice. And in doing the anti-hyperglycemic activity, an oral glucose tolerance test by Villaseñor was followed. After these 3 activity screening were done, results were gathered and analyzed to make a conclusion. Here, I'm going to show you the map of College of Science and Mathematics building, specifically the biochemistry laboratory wherein we perform our experiment. So here's the map, and then I'm going to proceed to our antibacterial assay. So for our antibacterial assay, we made use of the disc diffusion method in order to assess the zone of inhibition of the plant ethanolic extract against 2 species of bacteria, namely S. aureus and E. coli, in which it made use of a ruler as a measuring tool after its 24 hours incubation period. So 3 replicates were made. Each replicate contained 3 different concentrations of the plant. And these are 2000 ppm, 1000 ppm, and 500 ppm plant ethanolic extract, while the other 3 were 1% DMSO, ampicillin, and a group with no treatment. And in order to determine the anti-hyperglycemic activity of our plant ethanolic extract, an OGTT or oral glucose tolerance test by Villaseñor was followed. So here, high dosage consists of 2000 ppm plant ethanolic extract, low dosage, which consists of 1000 ppm plant ethanolic extract, 75% glucose, with both high and low dosages were induced on our female white mice. In addition, 1% DMSO, 75% glucose, and glucose together with metformin were also induced onto the test specimen. After it was induced, we proceed to the blood collection, wherein after the blood collection, We measured the blood glucose level of the female white mice using our glucometer.
And now I will be presenting the results and discussion. For the phytochemical screening, the results show that the plant sample has strong presence of phytochemicals such as alkaloids, saponins, and steroids, and positive for flavonoids. In contrast to the studies of Logesh Babu 2017, Finn 2018, and Elia 2015, their findings demonstrated that the ethanolic leaf extract of the Orthosiphon aristatus has strong presence of flavonoids, alkaloids, and saponins, as well as cyanogenic glycosides, tannins, and slight presence of steroids. According to Liu 2004 and Rao 2007, lack of or deficiency in phytochemicals can lead to an increasing risk of preventable diseases. For the antibacterial activity, the results showed that all three extract concentrations failed to exhibit zones of inhibition against the two bacteria. This result is also in contrast to the studies of Logesh Babu 2017 and Vijayan 2013. Note that the size of the disc is 6 millimeters. For the screening of the anti-hyperglycemic activity of the plant sample, results showed that all groups, except the negative group, showed a very big increase of blood glucose level after 30 minutes. Also, out of the 7 groups, 6 failed to reach the normal blood glucose levels. Both positive groups and glucose plus HD exhibit a gradual lowering of blood glucose levels, but also failed to reach the normal range of 125 milligrams per deciliter blood glucose level during the 90-minute time. This means that our plant did not exhibit any anti-hyperglycemic activity. Conclusion: the ethanolic extract of the plant sample Orthosiphon aristatus showed strong presence of 3 phytochemicals, and those are alkaloids, saponins, and steroids. Next, the different concentrations of the ethanolic extract failed to exhibit an antibacterial property against the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus and Escherichia coli. Third, the 2 concentrations of the ethanolic extract failed to lower the blood glucose levels of the glucose-induced mice, thus failed to demonstrate anti-hyperglycemic activity. And lastly, both results of the qualitative and quantitative tests in this experiment substantiated that the aerial part of the Orthosiphon aristatus contains different phytochemicals, but failed to demonstrate antibacterial and anti-hyperglycemic activities. That is all. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, presenters. That was a very impressive research study. As we all know, Wachichow plant is never an alien to most of us, especially now in our current situation as part of our coping mechanism during these trying times. Plantitos and plantitas have emerged. For the plantitos and plantitas, perhaps your plants may have this antibacterial or anti-hyperglycemic properties, right? Now, at this point, we are going to cater questions here in the Google Meet or questions from the YouTube. Or if you would like to ask questions verbally, please just click the raise hand option here in the Google Meet. Anyone? Are there questions in the YouTube comments, sir? Anyone from the audience? So while waiting for the questions from the audience, I would like to raise a question for the presenters. Now, based on your results, the aerial part of the Wachichao plant failed to exhibit an antibacterial property against the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli. Also, the ethanolic extract failed to demonstrate anti-hyperglycemic activity. So my question is, do you have a plan to study further about Wachichao? Since you are done with the aerial part, are you going to further study about its leaves or roots or the stalk?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. It depends. It depends, ma'am, because we have different courses, ma'am. Good, and for maybe for my other member, because Michaela is studying microbiology and I am studying in nursing, so maybe she can continue our research.
Okay.
Also,
yes.
in addition to that, ma'am, it is also one of our recommendations or for our future researchers incoming, especially for IDEA students. It is highly encouraged that to experiment the other parts, especially its roots or the whole plant. So that will be, I think, to study for the future researchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Helene. So I guess our junior high students were able to listen to the recommendation from your research study. Now we have a question here in our YouTube live streaming from Lovely May Aginid. Did the researchers do sensitivity testing for local and topical applications like patch and scratch test to Swiss albino mice? Again, from Lovely May Aginid, did the researchers do sensitivity testing for local and topical applications like patch and scratch test to Swiss albino mice?
Thank you for that question. No, we did not have, we did not experiment any the mentioned experiment that you said, and yes.
Okay, so thank you, Lovely, for your question. I hope the presenters have satisfied you with their answer. Any questions? Okay, from Micaela Bulahan, I'm wondering if how long you soak your plant parts in ethanol, and if it's okay if a plant will be soaked in ethanol for a longer period of time, maybe 1 week. And another question from Micaela, will there be no complications on these samples? Okay, again, how long you soak your plant parts in ethanol, and if it's okay if a plant will be soaked in ethanol for a longer period of time, maybe 1 week. Will there be no complications on these samples?
Thank you for that question, ma'am. We soak the plant sample in ethanol for 48 hours, and I'm not sure whether if soaking it for too long might, is it, what's the question again? Might can you repeat the question, ma'am?
Okay. Is it okay if a plant will be soaked in ethanol for a longer period of time, maybe 1 week?
Maybe for other literatures, ma'am, they can find 1 week soaking of the plant on the ethanol, but in our research we soak the plant for 48 hours.
Okay. Additional question from Micaela. Will there be no complications on the samples?
So far, ma'am, for we soak our plant for 48 hours and there were no complications on the plant samples we showed, ma'am. We're fine.
Okay. So, thank you, Michaela, for your question. I hope the presenters have satisfied you with their answer. Another question from Lisel. I am curious as to the reason why the presenters choose this particular plant for their research. From Lisel Memming, correct me if I'm wrong, Memminger or Memminger. I am curious as to the reason why the presenters chose this particular plant for their research.
Thank you for that question, ma'am Lisel. So we we chose this particular plant for our research because we all know that wachichao is become like we see on Facebook that it has diabetic properties, and most of the posts on Facebook are not verified, do not support any facts. Then we also heard from other communities that they use wachichao in order to treat diabetes. So we tested its efficacy, if whether it really reduces the risk of diabetes or it can reduce the blood glucose levels of the diabetic person. Thank
So, if you have further questions for our presenters, please reserve those questions because, again, if we still have time left at the end, we will be having our open forum. So you can present again your questions. So at this point, allow me to present the certificate to our second presenters. This certificate of recognition is presented to Theodore Vincent M. Mejorada, to Jezen T. Giganto, and Michaela Helene Grace A. Apila. A round of virtual applause, please. Thank you, presenters. Moving on, our third presenters will be presenting their study entitled Community Coding Club, Effects of the Learners' Computational Thinking Skills Using Robotics Activities. We have Ariel T. Alao, Dr. Amelia T. Buan, Mirna E. Lahoy-Lahoy, and Douglas A. Salazar.
Good day, everyone. Today, I will be presenting to you the result of my research study entitled Community Coding Club Effects on the Learner's Computational Thinking Skills Using Robotics Activities. Computational thinking, or CT, is a systematic approach of solving problem, creating and expressing its solution to be carried out by a computer or machines. Computational thinking is a fundamental skill used by everyone in the world. This skill is vital as it gives the learners a new way of systematic thinking in approaching complex problems using technological tools. Hence, we should add computational thinking to every child's analytical ability alongside reading, writing, and doing mathematics. The primary objective of the study was to analyze the possible effects of the community coding club on the learner's computational thinking skills using robotics activities. Specifically, this study aims to develop robotics activities to determine the computational thinking skill level of the learners, to investigate the process of the development of the learner's computational thinking skills, and to determine the learner's perception in the coding club activities. The conceptual framework of the study is composed of two significant variables, the independent variable and the dependent variable. In the independent variable, it consists of community of learners who will learn coding and computational thinking. These learners will be pretested to determine their prior computational thinking skill level upon joining the coding club. The researchers then develop a robotics activity that were developmentally appropriate and implement it into the coding club. After all the coding club activities, the learners underwent post-test to compare their computational thinking skill level and conduct interviews to gain the learner's perception in the coding club activities. The developed robotics activities, the computational thinking skills, and the learner's perception in the coding club activities are the dependent variable of the study. This study uses a descriptive research design utilizing quantitative and qualitative data. The quantitative data is obtained from the computational thinking skill test, and the qualitative data is obtained in-depth analysis of the learner's responses during the activities and the learner's perception in the coding club activities. The first step of conducting the study is to recruit learners within the community who are willing to join in the coding club. If the learners expresses interest in joining, the next step is to obtain a consent form from their parents and assent form for the learners explaining the purpose of the study. The participants will then ask permissions to video record the whole activities to verify the researcher's observation during the dry run and final implementation. In the implementation, the participants first completed pre-test to determine their prior computational thinking skill level upon joining into the coding club. After pre-test, the learners undergo a series of short lessons and robotics activities in the coding club. During the activities, an observation was employed to investigate how the participants solve each activity challenges. After all the coding club activities, the participants the researchers invited the participants to take the computational thinking skill post-test in the same way as described before. The test was administered 4 days after all the coding club activities to avoid detrimental memory effect of using the same set of items at both administrations, and to ensure the retention of the related computational thinking skills. The learners were then individually interviewed regarding their views in participating in the coding club. To answer the research objective number 1, the developed robotics activities follows a developmental process started with the identifications of the essential computational thinking concept that can be used in the study context and how can they best learn and practice. The researchers then mapped the topics to the computational thinking concept identified. This was then followed by writing and selecting appropriate robotics activities among many strategies and activity tools. Afterward, the activities underwent dry run and revisions and making reflection in every stages of the development. As a result, there were 5 developed robotics activities which link to the computational thinking skill concept. Figure 4.3 shows the sample of the developed robotics activity worksheet comprises of 3 parts. The first part is the learning computational thinking concept. The next part is the collaborative coding and programming exercises. The last part is the problem solving scenario. These activities were done using a robotics activity board, which is a 7x6 with 26 centimeter square mat grid. To determine the computational thinking skill level of the learners, their pre-test and post-test scores were compared. Based on the result, there is an increase of the learner's computational thinking skill level from pre-test to post-test scores. This implies that the coding club activities help the learners improve the learner's computational thinking skills. To investigate the development of the learner's computational thinking skills using the robotics activities, a systematic observations was employed. Thematic analysis was used on the observer's remarks on the learner's responses during the activities. Based on the investigation, the learner's computational thinking skills development started with the problem identification. This was then followed by the learners planning the robot's movement based on the identified problem. In this stage, the learners count the numbers of squares on which the robot has to move to reach to its desired destinations and translate their ideas into a code for the robot to act out. During this stage, the learners plan to attack the problem. After planning, the learners execute their proposed solutions. During this stage, the learners carefully observing the robot's behavior by reading the program or watching the robot run the program. During and after the execution, the learners reflect on the outcome of their proposed solution. During this stage, the learners recognize that something is not working. The learners investigate what went wrong and analyze which step in the plan or problem details they overlooked. Revision has been made based on the reflected outcome of their solution. If the solution is incorrect, but the problem is clearly identified, revise the plan, or if the solution is incorrect, reread and re-identify the problem correctly. These 5 stages is an iterative process until the solution is correct or until the robot reaches to its desired destinations. This enables the learners to predict the result of their outcome of their solutions and able to provide a reason for the proposed solutions and outcome. To, to answer the research objective number 4, the researcher conducted a one-on-one semi-structured interview to determine the learner's perceptions in the coding club activities. Using thematic analysis on the learner's responses, the following were the findings. After 2 weeks of implementation, the learners found the coding club activities as very enjoyable. According to them, it also give additional learning. Also, aside from having fun, the learners reported that the coding club activities makes their brains work which enhance their thinking skills. Furthermore, they also reported that they learn coding skills or programming skills, especially programming the robot's movements. However, there is also reported that they found the coding club activities as difficult, especially grasping the complex computational thinking concepts. Based on the conducted study and its finding, the following conclusions were drawn. The developed robotics activities helps the learners learn and practice computational thinking. The Community Coding Club helped the learners enhance and develop computational thinking skills. The next one is the use of the robotics interventions helps the learners develop problem-solving process. And the last one is the learner's perceptions in the coding club activities provides ideas and insight in raising the motivation of the learners and thinking skills using technology. That would be all. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you, presenter. That was a very educational research study. Indeed, this study shows that robotics take education technology to a whole new level, creating the next evolution in teaching. So at this point, we are going to cater questions from our viewers here in the Google Meet and in YouTube. Any questions? Or if you want to ask questions verbally, you can click the raise hand option in the Google Meet and unmute yourself. Anyone from the YouTube? While waiting for our viewers to ask questions. Okay, Sir Neil Lasta, you are recognized, sir. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, good morning. This research is fascinating for me because I did a similar research on robotics using Lego probably 6 years ago. My question is, who are your respondents? Walang ito. Akong question, who are your respondents? And did you gather demographic data? There will be a follow-up question if there's still time.
Requesting presenters to answer the question of Sir Neil
Okay,
Lasta.
good. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, sir. I am here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you. So for your question, sir, so I would like the respondents of the study were the learners within the researchers community, where is exactly within my vicinity, which is close to my home. The respondents were the K-12 learners, which composed of the different grade levels in the K-12, starting from kindergarten to senior high school, sir.
Wow, that's a lot of respondents. Did you notice any difference in, or did you even try to compare, for example, genders and how they reacted differently to this kind of computational training? Because that's what we did, and we discovered some interesting results.
Uh, for that question, sir, so basically, since this study was conducted within the restricted general community quarantine, what we did is that we choose only few sample in each grade level. So two samples in each grade level. So in kindergarten, there are two respondents. In the elementary grade level, two respondents. Secondary and senior high school, two respondents, sir. So basically, our investigations is aiming on how the students solve these activity challenges, or how the students computational thinking skills being developed using the developed robotics activities in the coding club.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sir. So answer, so the one of that is that we do not compare the gender of the students, since the respondents uh, is very small. So we should add the recommendation in our research. We add that we add that we add that it should be have larger respondents to generalize the results, sir.
Okay, thank you. I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Neil, for your question. Okay, another question from Ram Nico De Lejero. Can we see some documentations for this study? Interesting po siya if it does not bother your time and accessibility po. Thank you. Again, can we see some documentations for this study? Because Sir Ram is interested in your study.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you. So I would like to, if you email me, so I recorded all the activities. So if you email me, so it is privacy kasi. So if you email me, I will send you the documentations together with the consent of the respondents.
Okay, so Ram, send your email to Mr. Alaw so that he can send you the documentations that you are looking for. Any questions from our audience in YouTube? No questions? I would like to ask a question to you, sir. I'm just curious, can you give us an idea or a little background about the coding activity that you gave to the kindergarten learners? So, because based on your results, you have kindergarten learners as your prospects. So, can you give us a little background about the coding activity?
Okay, so thank you, ma'am. So for kindergarten learners, so in my study, I developed 5 robotics activities in which the 2 activities, the basic concept of computational thinking concept, are for kindergarten only. Say for example, in the first activity, the learners sequence the topic address in activity number 1 is only sequencing, in which the learners code the robot instructions in sequence so that the robot will reach to its desired destination. So in activity number one and two are basic only according to their grade level and according to the literature, that this concept is appropriate for kindergarten only. So basically, kindergarten finish two activities. However, elementary to senior high school students finish all five robotics activities, starting from basic to complex concepts. So in kindergarten, since there are only two activities to compensate 2 weeks intervention, in each activities, the kindergarten learners finish the activities in 2 sessions. So the uh, activity number one divided into 2 sessions, such that such that the learner were able to observe the basic concept of the computational thinking concept. So basically, this concept will ongoing until the learners were able to finish all the the concept, but it is beyond our scope of our study for now. So that this concept is basically for kindergarten only, and according to literature, so I decided for decoding the learners uses a cell phone, which is in which the students able to code the robot instructions. The robot's command is in basic direction for kindergarten only, for basic directions in which the learners were able to command the robot using that user interface, which is the program for the robot. It is the program in which the children were able to uh, were able to instruct the robot to its desired destination. So in my presentations, I have a sample I have there a sample of activity number one, in which in each activity they are guided by the researchers if the learners are stuck, especially in the kindergarten. So most interesting that kindergartens are more creative than any other grade school. That is part of the my result of the study. So if there is if you are interested, so I can discuss you more further if you are going to contact me in email. Yes, there's a lot of things to do regarding computational thinking. Uh, since this concept is something new to us, so I can give you guidance if you are interested to do more about research in our educational context.
Okay, thank you, Sir Alao, for your clarification. Um, any question from our viewers in YouTube? And okay, no more questions. So now, allow me to present the certificate of recognition to our presenters. We have certificate of recognition presented to Ariel T. Alao, Dr. Amelia T. Buan, and Myrna E. Lahoy-Lahoy for sharing their knowledge and expertise in this research study. We also have Sir Douglas A. Salazar. A round of virtual applause, please. Okay, moving on, in our last research presentation, we have the research study entitled Qualitative Assessment of the Antioxidant Phytochemical Properties of Ethanolic Extracts of the Barks of Artocarpus camansi blanco, seeds of Calyandra hematocephala, and leaves of Legodium circinatum, to be presented by Dale Matthew D. Lagaspi, Hananiel C. De Mayo, and Clent B. Galceran.
Good day, everyone. I am Dale Matthew D. Legaspi, a student of MSU-IIT Integrated Developmental School, batch 2020, and I am here to represent my group in this research. with the title of Qualitative Assessment of the Antioxidant Phytochemical Properties of Ethanolic Extracts of the Barks of Artocarpus camencei blanco, seeds of Calliandra hematocephala, and leaves of Lygodium circinatum. Medicine played a big role in the flow and conservation of human life on this planet. The ever-growing milestones of discoveries in the field over the past centuries have increased human survival and prolonged their life expectancy. Still, amidst the advance in developing pharmaceutical drugs and technologies, some people still tend to practice traditional medicine this day of age due to reasons such as financial instability or unavailability of needed medicine. This wouldn't come to as a surprise, for herbalism plays an important contribution in today's medicine and medical systems, being as herbal plants are considered as a rich resource of ingredients that can be used in drug development. The use of herbal medicine is embedded within a society's rich culture and traditions. Ever since the dawn of civilization, people prepared medicines out from the forage plants from their surroundings. Examples of these plants are the Calliandra hematocephala, or the powder puff, the Lygodium circinatum, or the nito, and Artocarpus camencei, or camencei. Folkloric claim states that camencei's bark is used for dysentery and as emollient. The seeds of powder puff are used for blood purifier and tonic. The leaves of nito are used for eye pains and wound treatments. This study aims to determine the phytochemicals of the chosen plant samples. To determine the bioactive constituents present in the ethanol extract of the chosen plant samples by gas chromatography and mass spectroscopy, or GCMS, technique. It is to test if the chosen plant sample extracts have antioxidant properties. So the framework of the study. First, the researchers has collected the plant sample, followed by the solvent extraction following methods found in the published literature of Uy and Francisco in 2016. After that, the solvent extraction was divided into 3 parts, equal parts, so that they will be used in 3 different processes. First, is the first extract was put in the antioxidant DBPH assay. The next extract was for the gas chromatography mass spectroscopy, and the last extract, it is for the phytochemical screening. The phytochemical screening, the researchers decided that they will only screen 6 bioactive compounds. These are alkaloids, steroids, tannins, cyanogenic glycosides, anthraquinones, and flavonoids. The methods of the study: the collection of A. camencei in Boog, Zamboanga, Sibugay. It was collected there. For the Calliandra hematocephala, it was collected in Barangay Santa Filomena, Iligan City. For the collection of the Lygodium circinatum, it was collected in Barangay Ubaldalaya, Iligan City. Antioxidant screening and phytochemical screening was executed in MSU-IIT, specifically in the College of Science and Mathematics, under the management of Professor Gomez. Also, the GCMS analysis was conducted in Ateneo de Davao University, and our extract was delivered there for it to be processed. Of the results and discussion of the study. For the phytochemical screening, results were based using a 3-point scale with scoring based on the Handbook of Philippine Medicinal Plants. As you can see, if there is the presence of plus sign, it means that it is present, the compound is present, but if there is a minus sign, then it is absent. So as you can see in the Artocarpus camencei blanco, there are 4 active compounds. These are the saponins, the flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. For the Calliandra hematocephala, we have 5 active compounds. We have the alkaloids, saponins, flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. And for the Lygodium circinatum, we also have 5 active compounds. We have also the alkaloids, saponins, flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. As you can see, we can see that there are single plus, double plus, and triple plus. It means that if there is a single plus, it shows turbid results. If there is a double plus, it shows moderate result. And if there is triple plus, it shows heavy results. It could be seen from this analysis that plant extracts from the plant samples had phytochemicals such as flavonoids, which were known to be good sources of antioxidants, and tannins, which have been shown to be primary antioxidants, and saponins have also been reported to have strong antioxidant activity. That's why Lygodium circinatum also has a very high antioxidant property that will be discussed in the next slides. Next is the antioxidant screening. So we have the IC50 values of vitamin C and the plant extracts were compared in this graph. DPPH antioxidant assay revealed that antioxidant activity of 13 parts per million for the calamansi bark were shown. Antioxidant activity of less than 10 ppm for the powder puff seeds were collected, and antioxidant activity of 143 parts per million for the nettle leaves were gathered. According to a study by Pongpai-Kiet et al., as stated by Jared et al. In 2017, extracts with an IC50 values between 10 and 50 possess strong antioxidants. This support the claim that calamansi and powder puff have strong antioxidants. While IC50 values between 50 and 100, it possesses intermediate or moderate antioxidant property like what the needle plant possesses. As seen in the graphs, the powder puff has the strongest antioxidant activity among the three, even surpassing the antioxidant power of the standard vitamin C used in the DPPH. Next process, we have the gas chromatography and mass spectroscopy. As you can see, in Artocarpus calamansi, there were 8 compounds. There were 8 compounds collected, and 2 out of 8 possesses strong antioxidant activity. These are the hexadecanoic acid and the hexamethyl. And for the Calliandra hematocephala, out of the 14 compounds found, we have 6 compounds that exhibits strong antioxidant property. We have the hexadecanoic acid, the phytol, the squalene, the heptadecanoic acid, the tetra-tetracantane, and the 9-octadiazanamide. For the Lingordium circinatum, 2 out of 9 compounds were found in this research. Namely, these are neophytidine and phytol. For conclusion of the study, for the phytochemical screening of the Artocarpus calamansi, it was revealed to have presence of phytochemical saponins, flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. For the Calliandra hematocephala, it was revealed to have the presence of phytochemical alkaloids, saponins, flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. For the Lygodium circinatum, it was revealed to have the presence of phytochemical alkaloids, saponins, flavonoids, steroids, and tannins. For the DPPH antioxidant assay, it can be said that the Artocarpus calamansi has a strong antioxidant, the Calliandra hematocephala has a strong antioxidant, and the Lygodium circinatum has a moderate antioxidant. Because of what we did in the gas chromatography and mass spectroscopy, it further supports that these plants have strong antioxidant because of the biological compounds that they possess. So for the Artocarpus calamansi, it has 2 biological compounds that possesses antioxidant. For the Calliandra hematocephala, it has 6 biological compounds that possesses antioxidant. And for the Lygodium circinatum, it has 2 biological compounds that possesses antioxidant. Based on the results we accumulated above, this study has shown support to the ethno-medicinal uses of these plants as an antioxidant, and it fully supports the folkloric claims stated before. Also, further researches may be conducted on these plants to fully show its medicinal effect once intake by humans. That would be all, and thank you.
Thank you, Dale. That was a very enlightening research study. So, people nowadays are more health conscious that as much as possible, we get everything that we consume or partake are organic. So, we have another plants that are added in our list, especially for our plantitos and plantitas. So, new plant collections are added. Now, at this point, we are going to proceed to the Q&A portion. Are there any questions from our viewers here in the Google Meet and in YouTube? Okay. Dale, I would like to ask a question. Your study focuses only on the qualitative assessment of the antioxidant phytochemical properties of the ethanolic extracts of the barks of Artocarpus camansi blanco, the seeds of Calyandra hematocephala, and the leaves of Lygodium circinatum. What are your suggestions and recommendations that you think will help or improve or enhance this study? Since we also have viewers who are doing their researches now. Shout out to our grade 10 students in IDS. So next school year, they will be in senior high school and will be doing another research study. And this study might be a stepping stone for them. Again, what are your suggestions and recommendations that you think will help or improve or enhance this study?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. We would like to recommend this study. At first, in this research, because we are very ambitious, we first told ourselves that what if we make a medicine, a tablet, by what if we make a medicine or a tablet based on the results we have gathered here? But since we do not have enough time, and since COVID-19 happened, then I guess our recommendation for future researchers is that you can use our research as a stepping stone, as a reference, so that you can create, or let's say you can make a let's say medicine, if you can. And also, by also referring to this research, you can also conduct the antimicrobial activity. And that would be all.
Sir, any questions from our viewers?
Ma'am, I would like to add on what Bill said, ma'am.
Any questions from the YouTube live stream?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Okay, time check. It's already 12:10 p.m. So, at this point, allow me to present the certificate to our presenters. Certificate of recognition is presented to Dale Matthew D. Legaspi, Hananiel C. De Mayo, and Clint B. Galceran for sharing their knowledge and expertise in this research study. A round of virtual applause, please. Okay. I would like to apologize to our viewers. Due to the time constraint, we can no longer proceed to our open forum. But if you really are curious and interested with the research studies of our presenters, you may send your questions directly to them for them to cater your inquiries. So we are now done with the presentation of the 4 research studies. So the presenters have been so generous to us by sharing their research studies and giving us ideas on how to develop, process, innovate products materials, and models. Indeed, this is a clear manifestation of our theme, academic resilience in these trying times through unity, understanding, cooperation, and transformative leadership. I would like to end our research forum with a quote from Proverbs 4:7. It says, "Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do, and whatever else you do, develop good judgment." For the audiences, thank you for attending this session, and also to the presenters for sharing your research studies. We really learned a lot. Reminding everyone to click the link on the chat section that will lead you to the evaluation form. Thank you once again for your participation. This is Hazel Dwight P. Bandong reminding everyone to stay healthy and stay curious. Goodbye and God bless you.